Right, can I call this meeting to order? This is the first meeting of the Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority, the IFCA, for the year 17-18. I'd like to welcome everybody and go straight into our first point of order, which is appointment of chairperson. Or chairman, would anybody like to propose?
Yeah, I propose Andy Guy to continue.
Thank you. Any other interested parties? Nope. Can I take a vote?
In favour,
yeah. There.
Good.
And I'd like to invite Councillor Guy up to take his place, and he can carry on doing the rest of the work.
Thank you once again for electing me as your chair, and I will do my best for the coming year. Before I move on to agenda item 2, I'd just like to go around the room, because we've got some new members, just to familiarise ourselves. So I'm Andy Guy, the chair of the IFCA.
I'm Diana Monglake, Senior Manager for Strategic Development.
Steve Watt, member for St Mary's.
Robert Francis, also a member of St Mary's, but I'm here as an MMO. I'm also a member of Wesleyan. Thank you for that. So I shall. Nick's coming. Yeah, he's coming. So Nick Jenkins will be coming later, so he gives his apologies for his lateness. Right, agenda item 2, to appoint a vice chair of the IFCA. Are there any nominations?
I'd nominate Tim Alsop to continue the role of vice.
I'd like to second that. Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Those in favour of Tim, Vice Chair? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Tim, would you like to come and join me?
Thank you.
Okay. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest, please.
Yes, Chairman, as a hobby fisherman, although I've only got one pot and it's only just gone in the water.
Commercial fisherman.
Commercial fisherman.
Any other declarations? No? Thank you very much. Right, agenda item 4, the minutes of the previous meeting, the 9th of February. Are we happy that they are a true record?
Yes, Chairman, could I just add something to IFCA 5/4/17? I think the sentence in the middle, he felt that a standalone website was the best option. We've actually had a standalone website since for 7 years. It is a discrete website, separate from the council. And the second bit, but the resolution, that the IFCA website be updated and improved to include bylaws. The bylaws have always been on the dedicated website. It's just clarification, really.
Right. You happy for amendment on that?
What do you actually want it to say then?
Well, only that it maybe change the sentence to the communications improvement should be on the standalone website. That makes that clear, because I know where Tim was coming from on this one. And the second part would be updated and improved to, well, it does include bylaws, to include voluntary agreements. So delete include bylaws, because it's been there for 7 years.
The members happy with that amendment? Yeah. I've got one small amendment. Apparently, IFCA 117, I never declared that I am a non-registered fisherman. So I don't know if that was meant for somebody else, but it definitely was not me. Okay. Kate.
it's slightly mixed, that, yes.
Yeah.
Bottom trawling?
Just bottom fishing. Can you amend that as well? Just keeps the minutes correct, doesn't it? Are there any other amendments? No? So can I have a proposal that they were a true record then, please? Yeah. Seconded, Robert. Those in favour? Thank you very much. That's sorted. Urgent items. There are a couple. I'm going to put... we do this. Item agenda 7, I'm going to hold that last because Nick would like to have a say on that. So hopefully Nick will arrive. So agenda item 7 is going to be put where 9 is, okay? So what I'll do now is the other urgent item I've got is the fishermen had a meeting and they have proposed a proposal for the IFCA. To me, this just goes to show how well we work with our stakeholders, which are the fishermen. And this is a proposal from them. And what I'd like to do is hand you over to Robert to say a few words on this, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, really just to reiterate that it had been on the radar for some time that we ought to increase the carapace length for crawfish from 95 to 110, which is in line with Cornwall. And the fishermen have been discussing it for over a year now. We had our AGM 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago even, and there was a proposal that we should adopt that, and it was unanimously approved by all the fishermen that that we extend that carapace length to be in line with Cornwall. So it's just as the chairman says, it shows that we don't have to be forced to do it. Actually, the fishermen feel that it's appropriate. We're trying to re-establish the crawfish stock in Scilly. Harry's been doing an awful lot of work on that already, as have some of the other fishermen. As some of you may know, but others may not, we have a relationship with a scientist in North Wales, David Fletcher, who is trying to cultivate the larvae, if you like, a bit like the lobster hatchery in Padstow that works really well. But obviously it's more difficult with not obviously, but it is more difficult with crawfish, and he has to get the feed right, and he hasn't got any funding yet and stuff. So I mean, it's a bit of a laborious process, but he thinks he's winning. He's been down to see us, and he's still taking buried crawfish from us. Yeah, it's a real good effort, I believe, on behalf of the fishermen to show they're willing in the improvement of the crawfish stock. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
No problem. Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, I agree, Robert. Everything that's just been said, it's really good to get the fishermen sort of involved and coming forward with these sort of proposals. It makes our life a lot easier. Working together really closely is really good. I wasn't at the meeting at the Fishermen's Association, and the report that's been put forward by Doug, who sent us apologies on training, but in the recommendations it also mentions not retaining buried. I just wanted to make sure that was also that was agreed.
Yeah, that was agreed as well. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
You.
Sorry, I was really.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Thanks, Robert.
Yeah. Tim?
I'd just like it should be noted, I argued long and hard over this with various people that were very anti, and I hope everyone out there, I hope it gets out there that the guys out there here do care and they can be trusted, and because I was never in doubt that long term the outcome would work out. And there's also been in amongst it, and the bit that we're forgetting is that it's come with some really good research out there. And incidentally, today is a good day because we found our first one that's got a yellow tag on.
Good bit of news. Kate? It just goes to show, we were at the association meeting, and out of all the 10 IFCAs, we are unique to the others, and we have a very good working relationship, and I'm proud of that myself. The recommendation is, as you can see, is somebody happy to propose that recommendation? Tim will, seconded.
Yeah.
Those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much for that.
So, Mr. Chairman, so the next step will now be to finalise that bylaw that's gone through, get it to the MMO for clarification.
Yeah.
Go through their legal, and then go through the steps.
Yeah. Just go through the process now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the next literary process is to write the impact assessment.
Yeah.
That's. I mean, the bylaws are dead easy. You can write a bylaw in 10 minutes, but the impact assessment, it depends on evidence, very strong evidence, and it's economic, social, and environmental impact as well. So, I always found that the impact assessments were more onerous than writing a bylaw. But I mean, this one should be fairly straightforward though, because it's so sensible.
So, good news story all round. Right, I shall move on to part 1, reports requiring decision, and I'll hand you over to Paul, our Fisheries Officer, for the agenda item 6. It's just an update, but if there's anything you want to...
Shall I get your hard copy?
No, I've got it, thanks. That's all right. Yes, this is just to give sort of committee members an update on what we've been doing within the IFCA. I guess well, since January, since when I arrived, I didn't attend the February meeting because I was on training. So if I'll move straight on to the tasks, so the habitat risk assessments for reef, looking at pots and creels and netting have now been completed and formally submitted to Natural England. We've got formal advice back from Natural England, and now sort of the next steps are to put within the HRAs. We commented that we'd put some monitoring programs in place to follow on from the HRAs. So now we're just on with putting those together. So moving forward with those based on the formal advice we got back from Natural England. So that work's just going to progress through, I guess, the next 2 quarters of this year and get those completed and submitted. The annual plan was also circulated to all committee members, all the edits and comments. I finalised a document and that's now being submitted to DEFRA, so that's all completed now and gone. Replacement enforcement vessel, I think we might as well just come back to that when we cover the paper, so I don't think there's any reason to go through that in any detail at the moment. Hobby fisherman permit bylaw, we received comments back from the MMO legal team. We've addressed those comments and it's now back with the Marine Management Organisation's legal team for final comment. When we get those final comments back, we have to advertise that. I think Steve might be able to correct me here, but I think it's 1 national and 2 local publications that we advertise that in, and then go through the consultation on that, and then that can be finalised. I know we chatted, Andy, about maybe disputing it to hobby fishermen directly. My only concern there is that in case we miss somebody. So I think what I'd prefer to do is advertise it in the publications and then put it on the website that's what we're going to do, and advertise it on the website where to find the advertisements so we can get the consultation.
Yeah, Chairman, could I just add to that? The problem with the consultation with the hobby fishermen is they've got no association, unlike the commercial fishermen. I tried several years ago to get them together, but no, they wouldn't do it. So best of luck with that.
Fingers crossed. We also went through the 11 voluntary agreements that we currently have with stakeholders. and people that attended that meeting was Mark Pender, so the chair of the Fishermen's Association, Andy Guy, so our chairman, Tim Alsop, our vice chair, Robert Francis, and Douglas Holt, who was the Fisheries Conservation Officer. And I found it a really productive meeting. We had some really good chats. Adjusted the original 11. I think we went down to 9, but 9 voluntary agreements that everybody was happy with and content with. So I still haven't done it yet, which is an action on me to get those now published and put onto the IFCA website, which will happen over the next couple of weeks. But just to really say, it was another example of everybody coming together and discussing how we're going to manage these things without having to, I guess, go down the bylaw route. And it was agreed that, although we've agreed them, we will monitor them and make sure that they are being abided by, because if they're not, then there's no point having them as voluntary agreements, so we'll just keep tabs on what we've agreed and take it from there. Another piece of work that we're moving on with is, I guess, moving on from the HRAs is the MCZ assessments for the 11 designated conservation zones around the Isles of Scilly. We haven't made a start on those yet, but while Kate's up, we'll be discussing moving forward on those. I've also been chatting with the Cornwall IFCA, and I've picked up on their templates that they're using. So we're hopefully going to try and keep it quite consistent, sort of in the southwest. So all the documents that are produced look the same. They've got the same sort of level of information in. So that work will be progressing again through the rest of this financial year. The IFCA Association have been quite busy, and it's kind of been based around Brexit and coming out of Europe and what the implications might be for fisheries management. So an IFCA's Futures document was put together by all the chiefs. We attended a meeting in York, a 2-day meeting, and put a document together. So that was all circulated to all the old committee members. So I'll take an action from this to make sure that new committee members have also got that document, because it details how the IFCAs as an association see us moving forward in fisheries management. So it just highlights some of the changes that might occur as we come out of Europe and how the government decide how fisheries are going to be managed in the future. But I'll take an action and circulate that so everybody's got a copy of that.
Lovely. Yep.
I just wanted to say, because of the strange constitutional standing of the Council of the Isles of Scilly, like the City of London, we have to be written into legislation to be in it. So can you make sure when DEFRA are looking at the Great Repeal Bill laws, that they pick up and write us in, otherwise we'll be left out again, which wouldn't be good. So I think it's something that if you could reiterate with your colleagues in DEFRA, that would be really, really good.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you for that. Tim?
There is quite a bit of crossover. We're talking about MCZ monitoring. There is quite a bit of crossover with the European Marine Site stuff we did, and that's fairly recent. And nearly all those sites, the evidence was put forward, and I think all except one are in MCZs, and those get revisited and rephotographed just by coincidence every year. So the original photographs that came out in MCZs can almost be pulled out of this machine at any time, which would, to show that nothing's altering on a lot of these sites. And if, obviously, as usual, if that's useful, we'll do that.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. I mean, the files that you sent me with all the separate MCZs on, with a lot of the there was a bunch of photographs for each of the MCZs.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll definitely be utilising that information as we move forward.
Some of them are out of date now, because I think that when we did MCZs, there was a 6-year limit to it, because at the end, the MCZ process took a long time, and then we had to panic and redo a lot of the photographs because they were then out of date, and we did a job for Natural England that involved doing that, and now they've been updated again, but those are now 2 years, 3 years out of date, and as I say, come the end of this year, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them will naturally get repeated anyway, so that you can keep that process, as far as I'm concerned, we can keep keep rolling, but yeah, okay.
Brilliant, thank you. And the last point on this report is just staff management. So just to reiterate that myself and Doug, sort of my team member, we've now got up-to-date PDPs, which Dino and I are going to meet, sign mine off, but Doug's has certainly been signed off and reviewed, and is now with the Learning and Development Department with the Council. So we're all up to date on staff management. And that's the end of that report.
Thank you for your report. Are there any questions for Paul? Anyone got anything to say on that? No? Right, thank you, Paul, for that. I'm going to hang on for 7, because hopefully Nick Jenkins is going to turn up. So we'll move on to 8. I'd like to welcome Kate, and I'll hand you over to Kate for the Natural England update.
Chairman, could I ask Kate about the SPA, because that's been rolling for years and we don't seem to be moving at all. You know, the SPA basically in Scilly, for the benefit of anyone who didn't know, is basically terrestrial, isn't it? But we do know there are breeding sites which are offshore. So I just wondered how far we've got with looking into that.
Any other questions for Kate? Thank you for your report. moving on to agenda item 9, the MMO. It's nice to see you, Wendy, and we'll listen to your report. Thank you.
I was asked by David to deputise at a reasonably short notice, I'm afraid, so I just put together really some topics which I thought would be of general interest, but I see that the IFCA here are very well versed with our EMFF funding scheme, and it's really just to promote an awareness of that there is still European funding available for particular items to do with fishing vessels. I've listed them on the report here, but anything, for example, that might improve vessel health and safety, so we might be looking at safety rails on a vessel, stern steps if you're working single-handedly, that sort of thing is potentially there for funding. We have in the Hale MMO office a specific team lead on the grant funding side of things, so if there were to be any queries, there's lots of information on the MMO website, but please contact us at Hale if you would like any guidance on that at all, or the grant team directly. Another point about marine licensing, which is obviously pertinent wherever we have a coastline and works going on below mean high water springs, so it's really just to flag up the requirements for certainly an approach to our marine licensing team if there are ever any works that are conducted below mean high water springs, and that could be as varied as works to sort of prevent coastal erosion in some areas. It might mean moorings, for example, which are to be permanent. There's a whole plethora of particular types of works that might come under the remit of marine licensing, and again we can provide local contact through our Hale office, but we do have a dedicated marine licensing team in Newcastle. It's fair to say that marine licensing can be chargeable, so there can be a fee levied for consultancy and the production of a licence. So just a brief awareness there. Following up from work that's recently been undertaken, training undertaken, I think Paul mentioned Doug is away training at the moment, and ourselves. We are trying to streamline our intelligence reporting through the IFCAs and the MMO to provide a more joined up process in terms of how we take forward intelligence and how it's disseminated. So there is training being undertaken by marine officers both within the IFCAs and the Marine Management Organisation at the present time, and that is there to help support our particular enforcement priorities across the board. And then a reminder again about fishing vessel licensing. You probably are aware that inquiries are no longer dealt with at what used to be Penzance and now Hale, and the South West Marine area has a central point for vessel licensing inquiries at our Plymouth office. So that would be the first point of contact for any inquiries to do with vessel licensing for fishing. We can make arrangements to provide vessel licensing officers more locally at Hale. I know certainly when I was doing that job, quite often I would see people coming across from Scilly who wanted to meet with other parties to conduct a transaction, because it can be so much easier to do the whole thing face to face and do the paperwork there and then. So we can still offer that service if required. May I, Mr. Chairman, just put a couple of extra pointers onto the report very briefly?
Certainly.
As fishing vessel owners, some of you may have had letters recently about the change to our ERS system, our fish register system. The Marine Management Organisation has effectively got a new IT system in place now, which takes information from vessels that are reporting electronic logbooks. I don't think that's appropriate to any vessels in Scilly, but also from the buyers and sellers register schemes, so that people who would normally submit their sales information to us, I think letters have gone out to all vessel owners in the last couple of weeks or so. There is guidance there if there are problems accessing the new website, but again, please approach us through the Hale office on our contact there if you've got any problems or concerns or queries about that. And then I did have an email from a colleague of mine at Brixham who tells me, having been to a meeting with DEFRA recently, that I understand there is now a dedicated mailbox set up for direct feedback to DEFRA regarding Brexit. which provides an email address which we can now share with industry for any queries relating to Brexit in terms of feedback, views relating to fisheries. So there is, as I say, a dedicated website. That is fisheuexit@defra.gsi.gov.uk. So there is an option there if you wish to put your views directly to DEFRA to be able to do that now. And that completes my report to the committee.
Thank you very much for your report. Are there any questions for Wendy? I'm sure there's nothing. But
Wendy, could you forward me that and I'll put it onto the IFCA news site so people can pick up on it?
Yeah, we'll do.
Thank you.
Problem.
yeah, Steve.
Thanks, Chairman. Just one question on flag, which is a bullet point on your first page. Fisheries Local Action Group, because there's a new one now, isn't there? Well,
I believe so, yeah.
but you're not actually technically involved, well, not closely
I'm
involved.
personally not involved with that. I think there were meetings earlier this year looking at putting together an equivalent type of organisation, and there are sort of individuals who represent local groups in that capacity on the mainland, and certainly act as a first point of contact for putting up representation as far as grant application funding and that sort of thing. So,
Yeah, I think the local person is Amanda Pender, so on Briar. So
right.
she's actually, it was me for 4 years, but
Okay.
then when I retired, and the new one came along, I believe so anyway, I'm pretty sure she is our
oh, well,
representative.
that's helpful to know. Thank you. Lovely.
Okay, thank you very much for your report. I'd like to welcome Nick Jenkins. Nick, I'm sure you would like to register an interest. Declan. As a... for the record, thank you very much. And now you're here, that brings us briefly to the last agenda item, which is 7, the purchase of a replacement boat. You've read the report, obviously, and I'm going to hand you over to Paul to have his say on it first, and then we will obviously debate on the agenda item. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So all the detail is in the report that I've submitted, and I'm hoping you guys have all had a chance to look through it. And the key points of getting a new patrol vessel are the current age of the existing vessel, its capabilities, and the opportunity that we currently have for a substantial amount of funding from the MFF, which is already allocated to the Isles of Scilly IFCA. So it's not a competitive bid. That money is there once the business case goes through and is accepted on their system. So coming back to the key points, we've already mentioned Brexit and what might be expected of IFCAs into the future. And the IFCA's Futures document that I circulated highlights the possibilities of the IFCA's region being stretched out to 12, so the responsibility of policing the 12-mile rather than the 6-mile, which brings in, I guess, health and safety issues with the existing boat. There's no cover for it, so there's no cabin on board. There's very restricted deck space for the deployment of survey equipment. So there's health and safety issues, and there's also the capability issues there. And I guess for me, it's don't look a gift horse in the mouth. We have a really good opportunity to get some funding from Europe, which is highly possible. It's the last opportunity we'll get. It's designated for replacement vessels, and I just think it's a really good opportunity to take it forward based on all the information on the report. So I don't want to go through the report word for word, because I'm hoping that members have had a chance to read it and have thoughts, and so I'd just like to open it up for discussion and just take questions or just general discussion points.
I'm sure there's one or two members who would like to make comment on this. I mean, if you look at the EMF grant, there's 57 grand. We've got 59 in the reserve, and then we've got the sale of the old boat if we decided to go down that way, which gives you the figure on page 11, which is 3.1. It's all there in the report for members. I'm sure you've all digested it, but I'm sure there's going to be some comments. So who would like to start the ball on it? Nick.
Kick off. looking at the financial side of it, the reserves, I don't know how these things work. If we don't use that, can we keep them indefinitely?
The reserves are put away each year. They go into the reserves statements in our statement of accounts, so they sit there and they carry on, and they're ring fenced because they come from the IFCA, and it comes from the DEFRA grant and the IFCA money that comes from the council. So yeah, it just carries on indefinitely, but you will reach a point where you do need to replace whatever vessel you have. It's whether you take the opportunity of enhancing that with the EMF grant, would be my view.
Mr. Chairman, as regards the age of the vessel, is this a sort of local government thing that has to be written off over a period of time? Because, I mean, if that was a private vessel, i.e. mine, I would keep it for another 20 years yet. You know,
my personal opinion of it really is, as we know with Brexit and everything else, are we going to have to police a 12-mile limit imminently? We don't know. It's not good, the boat we've got, for the survey work we do. And there's going to come a time when we have to upgrade. I mean, it's where we are.
Yes, go ahead. I mean, my feeling on the capability of the boat, having a more capable boat doesn't mean that more will be done in terms of enforcement, because you have to have capable crew as well. And my feeling is, in any weather that this boat is not capable of going out in, I don't think the new one would be much better. I think it'd be better off perhaps to charter the Pegasus or something along those lines. To me, spending 100,000 to increase the capability of the boat when we don't have the crew to match is a bit nonsensical.
Robert?
I would agree with those comments, Mr. Chairman. We have discussed this before, and we haven't got any members of the press here, have we? But
we're on webcast.
I don't need to go into any detail, but before your time, Paul, and it's not Steve's fault because he wasn't involved, but we have had some issues with our boat, and the public perception on Scilly of how that boat's been looked after and its tender was frankly nothing short of a disgrace. And the reason I'm mentioning that now is that Nick has already pointed out the costs here. We're going to have to dip deeply into our reserve fund. The fact is the costs are not going to stop there. You know, we've got to look after that boat. We also don't know that we'll get 30 grand for the boat we've got. I very much doubt it. You can't sell a boat for love nor money at the moment. And I just think we should be more careful. Frankly, we haven't got a clue whether we're going anywhere near the 12-mile limit yet. You know, I'm not sure that our government are going to be strong enough to try and do that. We've got no navy to help us. I just can't, frankly, see it happening. But if it does happen, we could perhaps deal with it nearer the time. We've talked for long and hard about chartering local boat. We've got loads of capable boats here. You know, if we need to go and do policing out to the 12 miles or in poor weather or whatever, it's not difficult to charter a decent boat, and our expenses would be a hell of a lot less than investing in this new boat. And in these times of austerity, and that we have to be seen to be being sensible and prudent in this, because there's a lot of councillors here involved in the IFCA as well, and I think all of us in the community, we've got to say, well, you know, is this money necessary to be spent? And my personal feeling is no. I'm not saying we necessarily need to knock it on the head completely, but I think if anything, it should perhaps be shelved at the moment.
Yes.
All I was going to say is two things. One, this has been signed off by a Section 151 officer in Cornwall, so that's happened. He's agreed to the expenditure as a capital expenditure. The problem with our pressures as a council are not in capital. our pressures are, as a council, are in revenue. And the problem with continuously renting boats or hiring boats is that it's a revenue expense. And that's where it becomes more complicated for us as a council. So the big advantage of, at this time, being able to do this is that we've got the EMF grant. The EMFF grant is not going to be around. It will be lost within 6 months, I would assume. So you have to make a choice whether you decide actually you don't want to do it at all, because that's what you're deciding by delaying. Deferment isn't really an option, it's a yes or no, because if you turn the EMFF away now, there isn't an option to go back. So for me, it's either you're saying yes or you're saying no. It's entirely up to you what your decision is, but that's your choice. Deferment isn't really a choice.
I say, I'm trying to be impartial as chair, and that sums up everything that I thought I said at the first part, because if we don't go ahead with it, we stand to lose 57,000. If that's the way members want to go, that's perfectly fine. But as you can see how the recommendation is set out, I think everyone should have a say here. I don't know if Steve's got something to say.
Yeah, but one issue that hasn't been addressed so far is the equipment that has come from DEFRA. At the moment, it has to be transported down the quay and placed on the rib. There's also a very large bit of equipment that is held by Cornwall IFCA, which we can't use because the boat isn't sufficiently standard to be able to use it. So that's an issue that hasn't actually been addressed, I think. But the new vessel would actually address that.
Kate, please. There won't be another opportunity. Thank you. Wendy?
Just from an MMO point of view, we work closely with Cornwall IFCA at the moment with their marine enforcement officers, and we do task joint patrols sometimes. We have marine officers in Hale, Brixham and Plymouth. We're all quite mobile, and we would like to foresee that we develop a good working relationship with the Isles of Scilly IFCA and continue that, because I know there has been a good working relationship. But again, a vessel with greater potential and capability allows us to consider joint working in a more effective way, I think. So from our perspective, we'd like to keep doing what we're doing, but certainly have the opportunity to continue that in a more effective way going forward, I think.
All right.
It seems to me that the MMO is offering effectively what Robert and Nick was suggesting, but in reverse. So Robert and Nick are suggesting we hire a boat. The MMO is suggesting instead of hiring the boat, we have the boat and we hire the skilled crew to utilise that boat. A new boat would also, as Kate mentioned, be useful for the survey work. Like as Steve says, the current boat just isn't capable of that. I myself offered to stand in voluntarily as crew on some survey work, and in that situation the boat was capable, but it was not ideal. A new boat would have to meet the requirements and be well procured, I suppose. The requirements of the new boat need to be outlined thoroughly before we should agree to purchase that boat.
I just say, because we'd have to procure, this is over £25,000, we can say we can say exactly what we want to get from our boat, but we can't specify what boat we buy. That's illegal for us as a council. We can't say we want a rib craft that does X, Y and Z. We can say we want a boat that does X, Y and Z, but which boat it will be down to the market. That's just the way our rules work. Unless there's a framework for boats.
I'll let Tim come in a minute and say.
I was only going to ask probably Paul. One of the issues here is not whether we got the money to buy it, is whether we got the money to run it. Has there been any figures done, Paul, with regard to how much more it's going to cost to run it and look after it than does it need a big trailer or whatever to take it out, and sort of compared with this one, has there any comparisons been done?
Yeah, thank you, Tim. The spec that we got, so we needed I guess an estimate of what said vessel would be, so we went through Ribcraft, and that was just on advice from Cornish IFCA Reviews Ribcraft. It's a local company, which means we can visit during the build. So we've been discussing the spec with those, and the engine spec would be more economical than what we've got at the moment. So the running costs in terms of fuel would work out cheaper than an existing vessel. In terms of trailer, I'd have to look back at the quote. I think we got the quote less the trailer, so we just went for the vessel on the quote. So I'd have to look into that and clarify that point in terms of maintenance. I'm not well founded in boats. I'd be looking for advice on that. But the essential part of the boat is a wheelhouse to protect in terms of health and safety, the ability to lift the equipment safely. So at the moment, officers are actually lifting well above what we should be over a flexible side of a boat and putting it over the side, which is not ideal. The new vessel, the way we spec'd it, we'd have inboards and we'd have a clear transom, so we can take stuff over the back with an A-frame, nice and safe, lift, pull it down, bring it back up. Another point that I'd like to raise is that the extra capability would mean that we could actually bid for more work, so we could actually use it to bring an income into the IFCA. So it wouldn't just be used to carry out monitoring work, but we could actually bid in for work to carry out existing survey work that needs doing round about the facilities. So it gives us the opportunity to bring an income into the IFCA and actually start self-funding ourselves a little bit more, which in the times, as you mentioned, Robert, austerity and DEFRA funding, etc., going down and down, it just gives us more of ability to be self-sustaining and look for work ourselves to bring in that into the IFCA. So it's, some more positives to think about.
The only slight issue with that is that in a very small community, and it's not personally me because I'm not running my boat for many years, but quite a lot of the other survey work in the island is done by other boats, and it can end up looking really bad if we've got a load of funding to compete with people who haven't got funding in business to take some of their work away. I mean, it's happened in other guises, and I'm just sort of seeing how we look in the islands and playing devil's advocate. A quick question: what sort of drive is it? Is it propeller, jet?
Propeller.
Right. Yeah, that's good.
Steve.
Yeah, just to round up really where we were 7 years ago. I managed to get a grant of £52,000 for the IFCA RIB. Now that really was for an enforcement vessel. The survey and the monitoring came later with the advent of the IFCA, because we bought the RIB just before the IFCA actually came into operation. And once it got underway, then there was a lot more monitoring work to be done. Since then, of course, we've had a lot more equipment which has been thrown at us, side scanners from Natural England, also the underwater camera from DEFRA. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a huge bit of kit which is collectively used by Devon and Severn, Cornwall IFCA and us, but we can't use it because we haven't got a vessel big enough or sufficiently robust enough to be able to use it. So it's not just a question of chartering another vessel, because then we'd have to put the equipment on that vessel to be able to do the monitoring work. Enforcement might be different. We could charter the Pegasus for instance, for enforcement, as long as the flag is up and it's recognised as an IFCA vessel. So enforcement is one issue, but the monitoring side, the environmental monitoring, that wouldn't be able to be done by a chartered vessel, in my opinion.
Just in response to chartering for enforcement, it just takes away our responsiveness. So if we have to go through a charter process to get on a boat to go out and enforce, then it puts a whole lot of process in place of us getting on a boat and going out there. You know, if we're tracking something on AIS and something crops up and we have to go through a charter process to get out there, then it just takes that away from us.
I'm sorry, but we had, Mr. Chairman, we had an incident last week where I know you were away, so again, there's no blame coming your way, but our fisheries officer was asked to inspect some dive boats that came over here. Nothing happened.
Well, I'm not aware of that request.
I'm not aware of that either.
Dive vessels, so where did the request come from? Can you?
Tim, do you want to enlarge on that?
Well, yes, I had a conversation with Doug about it. I did have a conversation with Doug about concerns about that.
This technically does come under operations, which the
Yeah, that's
committee
right.
shouldn't
Yeah,
really
yeah.
be delving into.
No. That's why I was a little bit. Yeah.
But I mean, apart from that, can we go back to the issue of cost? Tim raised the annual maintenance cost. I'd like to know sort of figures for increase in insurance premiums. How big is this new boat? What will it cost to lift her in and out? What moorings are you going to be using? Will that cost more? And then also coming back to the 30,000 that we potentially or are budgeting to get for the old boat. If we don't get that, where does that money come from? What's the timescale for being able to raise that money? How does it affect the budget? There are a huge number of financial questions I think we need to be.
Shall I talk first about the capital? So it's a capital project. It goes into our capital programme. Capital for a council is not difficult. Revenue is really, really hard. I agree we need to make sure that we've pinned down all the numbers as far as revenue, so things like maintenance and ongoing costs, but having signed off a number of the purchase orders for the current vessel, it is incredibly expensive to keep going. I'm hopeful that the new vessel would be cheaper as it's new. I'm happy to be, but what I would say from a capital perspective is that because we know the IFCA always puts between £10,000 and £15,000 per year back into its reserves every year, if the committee decided that it wanted to buy the vessel and we were £10,000 or £15,000 short, the council can, because it's part of a much bigger capital programme, fill that £15,000 in and take it from the reserves moving forward. That is a possibility. It's not an issue.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask Paul and Diana? I'm actually, believe it or not, trying to be positive here, but I don't want us to have egg on our faces over this because it needs more detail, in my view, my personal view, before we can say yes or no. And that my question for you is, you've already mentioned, Diana, that you think this is going out of the window if we don't do it now. You mentioned, Mr. Chairman, I think I'm right in saying that we got 6 month window or something for this. I mean, the point I'm trying to get to is, personally, I'm not happy to agree to this now. That's my position. Okay, I might be happy to agree to it further down the line, if we have a lot more information and we look at these costs that Nick's been talking about and I've been talking about, and we actually nail it down much better than we are able to at this point in time. And the other way of doing it is it possible to apply for this grant, but at the end of the day bail out and not sign it if we decide we don't want it? Is that, I'm not saying that's good practice, but you know, is that another way perhaps of
You've got to understand the reputational risk of taking funding from a funding body and then turning around and saying you don't want it, because they'll have allocated that spend against your project. That leaves the funder, which in this case is the MMO, as the accountable body for that funding stream, in a difficult position because they had allocated that money to you in their forward plan. So it's never a good way to approach funders. It never goes down very well.
This funding has been allocated to the IFCAs in general, so if we don't use it, it will just be reabsorbed by another IFCA. So they'll just redistribute that money to another IFCA. So we don't really have the opportunity to bid for it and then say we don't want it.
But how much time have we got? Are you saying we have to deal with this tonight, or would we have a month or 2 months or something like that to actually firm up the detail?
So the MMO want the bids in ASAP. So the business case, I forward them just not to get it agreed, but for them to look over it and say, yeah, that's right. And then I've held off entering it onto the electronic bidding system where it all gets finalised until after this meeting. I think we really need to get a decision on whether we go for it or not, because if not, that value has to be reallocated back into the pot for the other victims.
Can I just say one thing? What I was going to say is Paul has a budget of £123,000. He has to stay within his budget. If he thinks that he can stay within his budget with a new vessel like this one, or make additional income so he will sit in his budget, then that's his decision to take as the Chief Operating Officer. Members don't micromanage budgets to that level. If we do that, the whole structure of the council or of the IFCA will break down. What needs to be in place is a kind of strategic decision that we want to do enforcement, we want to do monitoring, we need the equipment to do it, and we're happy in principle that this is the right equipment, and then it's Paul's responsibility to make that happen within budget and on a yearly basis.
I mean, I'd like to make one point. When it says reserve fund of 59,000, for the last 5 years I've been on the IFCA, that was always, in my book, the reserve fund for a new boat. And we have the opportunity at this moment in time from the EMFF for another 57k. If members want to turn that away,
for officers to make decisions, but unfortunately we've made mistakes in the past, and we are, as members, we are responsible to the community. And I take a little bit of offence to the fact that we should basically keep out of this, because at the end of the day, I'm not prepared to go round St Mary's the laughing stock if we agree to this and we can't get the right boat for the right money. That's why I don't want to arse about face, and I would rather see all the detail on the table and say, yes, we'll rubber stamp that, or no, we're going to put it out. And that's where I'm coming from.
I don't think that's what I was saying. What I was saying is that there has to be some responsibility that lays with the officer around the budget and ongoing costs. If Paul is convinced, and he says he's done the work, that he can make this work within his budget envelope, there has to be a degree of trust. Otherwise, inevitably, you will be forced to micromanage every single decision that's made. And that doesn't work at all at any level.
Nick?
I accept that, but on the other hand, to be deliberately told that the new boat will earn income by more charter work that suggests that Coxon has time to do his charter work, which begs the question, what's he doing with his time now?
That's in the annual plan of what his job is, which we all passed.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's all stipulated, so the research plan's been stipulated, and I presume read by all committee members. The annual plan was circulated, and I'm presuming read and commented on. I didn't get any comments back saying that we weren't going to fill the time of 2 officers. So I'm assuming that everyone was happy with both of those proposed reports.
I mean, a lot more of the IFCA's responsibility, taking enforcement out of the way, is about conservation, work for the MMO, work for Natural England, collecting data. I mean, that's what we are. I mean, where we are now is how members feel, and obviously it's contentious, but I do feel we need to make a decision tonight to either go forward with it or not. Because the next IFCA, I think, is September.
I'm not convinced that that leaving it to September is the answer, and I'm sure that Robert wasn't. I didn't have a view on this particularly, and I was kind of sat on the fence a little bit. I tend to sort of like, I tend to feel as though something makes me twitch when I feel as though that certain members and certain comments are sort of like seem to be pushing us into a hasty decision, which sort of like just makes me, for no reason, but
it's not really pushing anyone into a decision. What it is, that there's 57k out there from the EMFF, which if we don't take action in the next 2 months, we will lose it. And if members want to make that decision, it's a no-go for the new boat. And if that's where we're going to be tonight. And as chair, I think we should make a decision tonight.
But it doesn't stop there, Mr. Chairman. As we said as well, I'm worried about these ongoing expenses. We also have a situation where we can demand extra money to pay for any shortfall from the council, and that will hit our revenue budget.
So coming back to the vessel that we spec'd in terms of to get a quote was 9 metres. It would be using the same moorings as we're on at the moment, so those costs wouldn't increase. As I've already said, the running costs, it's a more economical vessel, the one we have at the moment. We haven't gone into massive detail because we wanted to spec the boat, as I already commented, properly and in detail. The boat that we've looked at was to get a cost so we could approach the MFF, but also make sure in our own minds that we could afford it based on the reserve account and the resale of the existing vessel. So we haven't gone in, and I think Harry made a really pertinent point that it's got to be procured with a lot of detail and a lot of experience in there. And we're not saying that we're just going to get the money and go out and buy a boat. The idea is that we get the money that's there waiting for us, and then we spec the boat to how we want it, so it does work. So there's no doubt that that vessel will not be capable of what we need to do with the IFCA.
Have we got some more comments on this? Does anyone like to make a proposal?
Yeah. I would say, Paul, that if we could end up with some sort of like binding, if we could buy the boat under some sort of binding contract with the suppliers to make sure that there isn't, because quite often I've heard loads of stories and had the same sort of thing myself with on a minor scale where you start off thinking it's going to cost so and so, and then the extras come in, and really we want to make sure we've got a price with everything that you want in there, and that's sort of like almost binding, like a contract with them.
So the spec, I can't, did I attach the spec or the visuals of the
Yeah.
So that was the spec. So that's spec'd with an A-frame for lifting all the equipment. It's got the wheelhouse. It's spec'd out to match the existing vessel and more. So There
Does
shouldn't be any hidden costs.
does that include all electronics, GPS, VHF, sound?
Sorry?
Does it include all electronics?
Yes, yeah, that's in the quote.
That's
Yeah.
what I was
Yeah.
sort of thinking. I was asking you.
That's all in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
It just might interest you to know, I had a conversation this morning with James Stediford, who has a Ribcraft, okay, that he's not happy with. And he asked for a spec for a new boat. And he said, I haven't gone for it at the moment, Robert, because he's at 300 grand. And James Stediford, okay, he does mainland trips, but I mean he's just running people. He hasn't got the stuff on it that you would need, and he's talking about 300 grand. Now that is twice as much money as you're talking about for a similar boat. So I just throw that in. Again, I'm not mischief making here, I'm just making the point. Boats are money, believe me.
I don't disagree, but can I just say, can we not keep using the name Ribcraft? Because once we procure, it may not be a Ribcraft, it may be, but it's about the specification. What we specify will determine who wins the tender, if that's the way we go.
And just coming back to that point, we needed a quote or some idea of what the value or what expense we would incur if we went for a new vessel. So the quote that we've got that's in the document of 146 has been specified by Ribcraft. So they've quoted us, and it's a full breakdown quote of all the electronics, the engine, the deck. It's broken down into minutiae, so we know which bits are costing which amount. So 146 is a quote from Ribcraft, although we might not be going with Ribcraft, but it was just to give us an idea of what the spec of vessel would be costing us.
Market testing.
Does that come MCA licensed?
Coded, yeah.
It does. So it's their responsibility to do it, because I know one other person that ended up costing a fortune because they went down that route, and it ended up that it didn't actually, when they came to it, they didn't actually put right what the MCA agreed on. So
we've specified the coding we require for that vessel within that.
But what happened was that that person, without naming names, that person had the spec, and when it came to the inspection, which the buyer did, the MCA put a load of things in the way, and they went back to the manufacturers and said, no, we did it to their code, and wouldn't budge on it. So there has been an issue there in the past. So that blew a lot of costs on that particular vessel. So they need to do the coding, really, is what I'm trying to say, Paul.
Okay.
Yeah, it just seems to me that there's only so far we can go in terms of getting all the detail up front and something from the rest of the stuff, because it seems to be quite torturous, but there's a certain process to getting this fabric and getting the procurement process through, and we've got the grant process as well. So we've got a lot of information here. We've got a sort of indicative quote from one company, and that seems to work out, even though
would it be pertinent to say that if we did go for a new boat tonight, that the committee, i.e. the 7 of us, could have an input to the new boat? Would that be a little bit more suffice, Robert? I mean, we're going to be stalemate here in a minute and take a vote to go yes or no, and it's just...
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to hold this back, but I have to say I cannot agree to it myself at the present time. I'm not comfortable with it. But, you know, I think there's enough people here that probably want to run with it. And so, you know, I shall just abstain, Mr. Chairman, at the moment, because I'm just not comfortable. I'm not against it.
Right.
I'm just not comfortable.
And I'm comfortable with that because that's your right to do that. Right, we've got the recommendation, which is in 3 parts. Have we got a proposer to take this forward? Or would you like to...
Chairman, I'll propose it. I would add, actually, I have to agree in principle to that. I don't know whether that would smudge it, fudge it a bit. In the resolution, committee members agree in principle to the purchase of a new vessel, rather
Because
than
in
just...
a way you have, because
Yeah.
part 2.
Yeah, if funding is not adequate, yeah. So I'm prepared to
You're prepared to...
propose
with that amendment?
Yeah.
Is there a seconder for that? Right, so I've got a proposer and a seconder. Can I now take it to the vote, please? Those against? Those abstaining? Would you like your names recorded? Yes. Yeah. And you're abstaining, Tim, as well? You're for it. Thank you. Right, well, thank you for that agenda item. Now we've got a decision on that. That brings us to part 2, reports for information only. There's no parts in part 3, so I shall close the meeting at 7:45. Thank you very much for attending.